Welcome to this special episode of Mensch-Kight Geopolitics, where I'll be talking with David Nabhan about his recent article on Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. All right, insiders and Mention, I'm here with David Nabhan. You may be familiar with him as the science guy. He's into all kinds of fascinating stuff. He is shaking up science on Newsmax and tectonic shifts for the Times of Israel. And today he's here to talk to us about an article he's recently written about Senator John Fetterman in Pennsylvania, who's been taking a lot of heat for being rational and sane, which is the sign of the times we're in, my friends.
Well, you said a mouthful about John Fetterman being set upon simply because of some basic sanity. The only reason we're talking about my op-ed in Pittsburgh's Jewish Chronicle that came out a few days ago, it's not because Senator Fetterman is some great sage politician or a savior of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's for John Fetterman's basic normalcy, as you said, as concerns some important issues, especially juxtaposed against the death cultism and anti-American frenzy that's long since having taken over the once sane Democrat Party that he's among whom he's currently with. It's titled tongue-in-cheek, Senator Fetterman must have health concerns since he supports Israel. And I hope your listeners can, it's at the Pittsburgh Jewish Chronicle, and I hope your listeners who are interested might click on it and give it a quick read. It's short.
Yeah, I'll have the link if you're listening on YouTube, the link will be in the description. I'll put the link with wherever it's posted on social media. And I've already shared it once on X, but I will share it again over a couple times over the coming days so that if you're finding my copious messages on X, it'll be somewhere in there. But yes, you can go to the Pittsburgh Jewish Chronicle. So before we dive into that, though, tell me a little bit about your science work and some of the things you've written.
Well, I'm a science columnist for Newsmax and the Times of Israel, and I've written 4 books on seismology or seismic forecasting, and 2 books on science fiction, and fortunately, many hundreds of op-eds all around the world in magazines, newspapers, and science periodicals, talk radio venues having to do with just about every interesting scientific concept that has to do with where culture, science, and politics and religion meet, everything from Australopithecines to Zoroastrianism. I've been very fortunate to have gained the attention of some great venues all across the world, every continent on Earth, except Africa, and I'm still trying on that one. I'm not giving up hope there. So. The Jewish. I'm not Jewish, as a matter of fact. I'm half Lebanese, but many Jewish, a dozen Jewish newspapers in the United States, for example, have allowed me to weigh in on a number of, and Canada also in Montreal, on a number of topics that would directly impinge upon Jewish Americans as well.
Excellent. And we're always grateful for the help. And actually, I have a number of friends who are from the Middle East, and people who grew up there in places like Lebanon or whose family are from Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt. They have a very different perspective on a lot of things. And I think that they have a reality check that they need to give a lot of people in the world, because people will say, oh, we can have peace, we can do this. And it's like, well, you need to understand the cultures that you're dealing with, right?
Absolutely. And, back to the op-ed, poor Senator Fetterman, it's, I voted against him. I'm a conservative Republican. But I will next time. I'm admitting the error of my ways. Even though we disagree on quite a number of important things, as you pointed out at the very beginning of our talk, the idea that he is a high-ranking Democrat official who is at least grounded in normalcy, juxtaposed against the incredible left-wing slinging off a cliff that the Democrat Party seemed absolutely determined to engage in. You know, the two-party system only works in a country when they can, both parties kind of balance each other. Both parties play off each other. It's not healthy to have one party immersed in this incredible insanity that has overtaken the once sane Democrat Party. So, as a Republican, at the end of my op-ed, I suggested that perhaps Senator Fetterman might do what Senator Manchin had done, coming to grips with the same sort of problem, and he went independent. So, at the end of the op-ed, I suggest that perhaps Senator Fetterman may want to opt for that, opt for that means to allay these unbelievable attacks that are coming on him from his own party cohorts.
That is a fascinating trend there, that senators like Joe Manchin, like Kristen Sinema, we're talking about, I mean, these are not hard, conservative voices, right? These are not people who would be welcomed into the Republican Party. They should be mainstream Democrats. I mean, I hate to do the meme, but I mean, I'm old enough to remember, right? I'm old enough to remember in the 90s when there were good Democrats and good Republicans. When I went to my first AIPAC policy conference in 2006, I mean, almost everyone was pro-Israel. Right? There were a very small number of members of Congress who were even questioning. And, I was on a team that would go sit down with some of these more difficult members of Congress and talk with them about the issues. And usually, they would nitpick a few things, but they heard us out and were generally in agreement. What a change has happened in 20 years. And like you said, I mean, so let me back up just one second. I mean, so Pennsylvania is, it has been a blue state in some times. Lately, though, you have a Republican legislature. It's voted for Trump twice in the last 3 elections. It's clearly a place known for its coal miners and union workers, right? Its working class values. You would think Pennsylvania would be the kind of place where you would have very competitive elections, where you would have successful moderate Democrats and successful moderate to conservative Republicans there. Why is Senator John Fetterman under attack? What are they saying about him, and what's happening there? Just because he's doing what I'm looking at Pennsylvania, looks like pretty sensible stuff for Pennsylvania.
Well, his aides and party hacks have let out recently the snide insinuations that Senator Fetterman's health is supposedly of concern. The gossip is that he, in the news lately, is that he loses his temper, drives recklessly, shouts and argues. He skips doctor's appointments. The Homeric hypocrisy, though, is that this is from the same Democrat apparatchiks who spent 4 years with their heads in the ground in front of all of us, the whole world, desperate to avoid coming to grips with the bumbling, elderly, confused pseudo-president that we all watched stumble, and they themselves watched stumble through an entire term.
It's President Autopen.
Without saying anything. They didn't say a single word. And now magically they've acquired this super medical powers to instantly assign Senator Fetterman to the infirm category. And immediately upon his voting for normalcy, strangely enough, that's a coincidence, rather than the far fringe insanity that they seem desperate to compel us all to go along with. What we're witnessing, and that's what the op-ed's about, in this attack on John Fetterman by his own aides and by his own party, is something good's going to come out of it, hopefully, because we can all hope that this is a prelude to what needs to happen in the once sane Democrat Party that you mentioned. It's been taken over by a keffiyeh-wearing, pro-terrorist, far-left insanity certainly over the last few years. It's been a long time coming, though. And for the health of the two-party system, as I mentioned, we can thank goodness for public servants like Senator Fetterman. So I'm going to vote for him next time around, even though I'm a conservative Republican. I've never voted for a Democrat in my life, but I'm going to vote for Senator Fetterman because I'd like to help the Democrats get back on their feet and shy away from that cliff that they keep wanting to leap over head first.
That sounds reasonable, and we can juxtapose him with Chuck Schumer, who is also a Jewish member of the Senate, who lately, apparently he's concerned that AOC is going to try to primary him, and if you look at the polls, he's in some deep trouble there if she does run. Now he's out, shouting, taking on the Palestinian side. President Trump called him out recently, saying that he'd become a Palestinian in Trump's usual sort of comic way of addressing these things. But, what we're hearing from that purportedly the mainstream, he's the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, right? He should be the mainstream candidate. He should be advancing sensible policies for the whole party. And yet John Fetterman's the lead on sanity when it comes to issues relating to the Middle East. How do you see that playing out?
Well, here's where I'm going to maybe ruffle some feathers, because I was so happy and so pleased that this op-ed came out. It's a ferociously biting op-ed. It doesn't pull any punches. And I'm so glad that it came out in a Jewish, the Pittsburgh Jewish Chronicle, a Jewish newspaper, because history is going to really scratch this Jewish American support for the Democrat Party, Schumer and all, even Chuck Schumer, as you say, here is a Jewish American in bed with a party that, you can see he's completely at sea as to where to go. And I don't, I do feel for him somewhat, but this is the party of Linda Sarsour, Al Sharpton, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Keith Ellison. In 2017, Keith Ellison was elected as the deputy chair of the Democrat Party. At that moment, Keith Ellison was one of the right-hand men of Louis Farrakhan. He's a Nation of Islam lieutenant. So, in 2016, Jewish Americans, the year before this happened, Jewish Americans voted for the Democrat Party 75%. The electorate, 3 out of 4 Jews since Jewish Americans over the last century, for decades, have voted Democrat. And in 2017, to push this incredible lapse in the Democrat Party's leadership's idea about what they can do to Jewish Americans and get away with, they pushed it to the extent that they put Keith Ellison, world-class anti-Semite, as the deputy chair. And a year later, in the midterms, Jewish Americans still voted exactly the same. It made no difference whatsoever. 75% of Jewish Americans voted for the Democrat Party, even headed by a world-class anti-Semite. Now, it's gone from bad to worse. The number that went for Kamala Harris in this last election wasn't 75%; it was 80%. So history is really going to have future historians are going to scratch their head over how in the world it was possible for people like, Jewish Americans. They're family-oriented, they're law-abiding, they're patriotic, God-fearing, with the greatest work ethic on the planet. And they're so closely aligned with a party that considers the nuclear family anathema, a party of scofflaws, flag burners, who abhor work and look for welfare, the sort the art that they like places crucifixes in urine and elephant dung. So, how can a marriage between up and down like that have crystallized and continued for, it's almost a century now, and over the last 10 years it's been plainly, perfectly made clear that the Democrat Party has no use for its Jewish cohort that still continues to vote Democrat. I'm flummoxed by it, but that's why I'm so happy it came out. Such strong words came out in a Jewish newspaper.
Yes, it boggles the mind to see the way these things are going. It's unbelievable.
Have you wondered about that yourself?
Oh yes, and I've talked about it in the past. Dennis Prager's point that half the people who call themselves Jews are secular leftists who just don't want to call themselves white, right? There's a deep cultural I don't even want to call it a trend. It's like it's this deep-rooted cultural force in the Jewish community that we are left, and it goes all the way back to the Roosevelt years. My family as well, even though we're Landsmen, we're head over heels for FDR and his program. And since then, they voted. Now my grandparents did start voting Republican for Reagan and Newt Gingrich, but you look at that. It's like for some reason a lot of Jews just don't get that the Democrat Party has changed. They hear the rhetoric, Trump's an anti-Semite and all this kind of thing. He's got a Jewish daughter and Jewish grandchildren, people.
Yes, Jewish grandchildren.
I mean,
he's the most pro-Jewish president we've ever had in our history. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem,
exactly,
and turned his back on all the 200 nations that screamed bloody murder over it. I don't know how many countries have followed his lead, but it's certainly not. He took some heat for that. So I think he's very pro-Jewish.
Absolutely, and every few months we get a new announcement from some other country that they're moving their embassy to Jerusalem.
Good news.
Once the U.S. moved, I mean, a lot of countries decided, hey, it's you wouldn't come to the U.S. and build your embassy in New York, right? You need your ambassador to be closer to the capital where the decisions are made. Well, that's Jerusalem and Israel. Having an embassy in Tel Aviv is really silly, and we play these games where the government of Egypt says, we have this diplomatic dispatch for the government of Israel in Tel Aviv, right? It gets silly after a while. But yeah, so with all the rhetoric we're getting, and so obviously, Fetterman votes on a couple of moderate issues, supports a couple of things that he agrees with the conservative agenda, where there should be some overlap somewhere at different times if you're a thinking person, and he supports Israel. And like you say, now they're out there saying he's losing his mind. Now we know he did have some mental health issues during the campaign that conservatives raised, and I mean, when you put yourself in the public eye, you open yourself to those kinds of questions.
Rightly. Correct.
Yeah, we need to know that our elected officials are healthy physically and mentally, but you just can't vet them if they're Democrat, right? And now they want to say the same things. Now they're questioning the same concerns about Fetterman because he's not voting the way they like.
Well, what set them over the edge is a couple of things, especially the lunatic justices at the International Criminal Court. You'll remember a few weeks ago actually dreamed up some incredible nonsense having to do with going and arresting the Prime Minister of Israel. They wanted to charge Netanyahu with war crimes, and Fetterman voted with the normal crowd in the Senate to completely to sanction and to come down hard on this lunatic court that would dream up such a ridiculous idea of going and trying to arrest the Prime Minister of one of the leading nations on the planet. When he does things like that, the Democratic base loses their mind. Whereas the average American would say to himself, well, here's exactly what I would do if I were in that case. Of course you can't go arrest the Prime Minister of Israel. Of course you should vote no on that sort of absurdity. And he's just doing normal things like that has made him really put a target on his back with the far leftists that somehow have gained such control over the reins of the once sane Democrat Party that unfortunately is going down a road that I don't know. Where will this end in a few years is anybody's guess, but history is going to have a hard time trying to come to grips with how people could turn on themselves, not just Jewish Americans, but Americans of all stripe. The morose, downcast, death cult-like tenor of the Democrat Party. We're all going to die in 10 years. There's the climate alarmism is outlandish. We're supposed to hate ourselves if we're white. Math is racist. We can't tell what a woman is. We don't know. Men can become pregnant. All the insanity that has been peddled at us, it fits together. It's a nice little. It makes sense if one is peddling the sort of thing that a death cultish view of the future, almost like those medieval flagellists who went from town to town whipping themselves. The end is upon us. The future is not bright. It's terrible. This sort of thing has taken over the mindset and the zeitgeist of the Democrat Party, and future historians are going to wonder about it. It doesn't really make any sense for a sophisticated nation like the United States, with a third of a billion of the most, smartest, most well-educated, most sophisticated people on the planet, in the leading country on earth, to fall for that sort of canard is shocking to me, and I'm sure it's going to shock future historians.
It does, and we see some of the same kinds of attitudes in Rome and in the British Empire and elsewhere as well. I wanted to ask you, so, first I want to make a point, because you talking about that. For years, the left has been getting crazier and crazier, and the crazy that I saw on college campuses, 20 some odd years ago when I was in college, I could see some of the nuttier stuff coming. But it's gotten so much worse. And yet the media, CNN, MSNBC, they portray the left as the sane ones, and the right, or what do they say about J.D. Vance? His opinions are weird. And, look at the things they're saying. But, they get a lot of cover for that. And I think there are a lot of people who just don't know, they don't understand how bad it is. But with all this rhetoric, we've had this horrible incident the other day. Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram were gunned down in cold blood in Washington, D.C. by a terrorist who, screamed, free Palestine, this guy, Elias Rodriguez. He's shouting free Palestine and saying he did it for Gaza. Turns out he worked for, some left-wing NGOs, nonprofit organizations, and, came through the sort of activist machine of the far left. How does this connect to that? I mean, how do we go, you're talking about this death cult. I mean, is it just a bunch of kids shouting on campus, or are they really, going to start shooting Jews in the streets? I mean, we've already seen it happening. How far does this go?
Well, a nation that's lost its grounding, if you look at not just these keffiyeh-wearing activists who couldn't find Palestine on a map, they couldn't find France on a map, you'd be stunned. I've studied the degradation of higher education in our country, and I could give you some statistics that are just completely shocking. But the idea that you could get that professors would stand by, for example, I mentioned that math is supposedly racist. This has made its way into the Seattle public schools, and in many public schools up and down the West Coast. Mathematicians have been cowed to go along with the everything is evil, the West is bad. Geneticists don't dare stand up and say that there's XX chromosomes and XY chromosomes, and one's for male and one's for female, that there aren't 102 genders. A nation that has had its science and its common sense ripped from it, and with having created tens of millions of people with a big hole in their soul. Christianity is a farce. Religion is stupid. Whether it's Judaism or Christianity or even Islam's okay. They're for that one. I take that one back. But they being these people who now seeing Jews being shot in the street and being acclimated to listening to the TV and have the TV tell them this is okay. It's not that bad. These people deserved it. Remember those Palestinian children there. Let's talk some more about the starving Palestinian children. They fill up. This is a people who've once you've lost all the traditional foundations that made this country and any country great for so long, you fill that up with nonsense. You fill it up with deviant stuff. And anybody with a pair of eyes can see that this country is being filled up with plenty of upside down ideas. And history's view, I keep going back to that. I've talked with, for example, you wonder how how things can turn from screaming kill the Jew like Al Sharpton did, and then now killing the Jews is what's happened just in the incident you mentioned, and Jewish students being attacked on college campuses across the nation, Columbia, Harvard. How do these genocides start? And I've written articles and I've studied somewhat deeply some interesting aspects of the Rwandan genocide that nobody but me, that I can find on my search engine, nobody's brought up a few of the things that I've questioned. For example, and this conflates with what I was talking about in how the media has browbeaten Jewish Americans and leftists into thinking that Judaism is awful, Israel is awful, Islam is good, the Palestinians are right, all this river to the sea stuff, and this proto-genocide preamble to some stuff that could get very ugly in the very near future. In Rwanda, believe it or not, I queried, as I was writing some articles about it, I queried the greatest African history scholars on the planet, one at Harvard, one in Johannesburg, and asked them, I said, because I was wondering, I said to myself, were there any Tutsis who took the side of the Hutus just prior to the genocide? Were there Tutsis who stuck up for and aligned themselves with the very policies that were going to cause them and their entire 800,000 Tutsis were macheted to death, were massacred over the course of 103 days. And believe it or not, these scholars told me that there were Tutsis, not many of them, but it existed. The phenomenon does exist of Tutsis supporting Hutus prior to the genocide. So you brought up Rome. In some instances, sometimes civilizations ready to commit self-suicide and self-destruction, they have like in Rome back in 402, 401, around just before Alaric showed up and destroyed the city, they had sumptuary laws that disallowed people to dye their hair blonde, that made it illegal to wear pants. There's sumptuary laws against wearing furs. People in Rome, just before Rome fell, were starting to take on the characteristics and the look and the feel and the talk and the dress of the barbarians, the very people who were coming to do them in. And we're seeing that, I think, in our country right now, where it's avant-garde, it's chic to be creepy, to be sexually deviant, to be on the side of the terrorists, to dislike Israel and like Iran, and it's again, from my point of view, and I'm a philosopher, I just have a pair of eyes, and I've lived long enough to understand that things can go wrong so easily in a complicated world that we live in today. It comes, I think, from a culture having lost its grounding and flailing about and trying to grab onto just about, to anything, including the barbarians' pants that are, at the gates, including dyeing your hair blonde when they're the people that are going to kill you.
Absolutely. And this does come, it's been noted, it comes with a little bit of the decadence. We stop having the traumas of like the Depression and the Second World War. We have good times and people go, start to act weird. They have nothing better to do, so they cast about and create traumas of their own. I would like to note, as my listeners know, that it is well documented by historians that the anti-Semitism and the nationalism that brought forth the rise of Hitler, that brought the Germans to embrace a psychopath as their leader, started in the universities. In 20s especially and early 30s. The universities were hotbeds of this kind of anti-Semitic nationalism and the stabbed in the back theory and all this kind of thing. And we're seeing the same things here now. I mean, they're throwing things at Jews on campus just for being Jews, not Zion. Like, we're only against Zionists, but they're throwing things at Jews. I just joked on the last podcast. Kenya has peacekeepers in Haiti. If I were to protest the Kenyan occupation, if you will, of Haiti by throwing things at African Americans, I'd be tarred and feathered. You'd be completely ostracized. And yet, when it's Jews on campus, that this is allowed. The police just stand by and do nothing.
Well, could you imagine being a Jewish student on a college campus in the United States today? At Columbia or Harvard? This is embarrassing. It's outrageous that we're allowing it. Thank goodness President Trump is doing everything in his power to yank money away from them, yank billions of dollars away from them, keep demanding that they employ police to arrest these people who are attacking Jewish students on college campuses. And this has been going on for a long time, not just on college campuses. I wrote an article in the Times of Israel a while back about a new phenomenon taking place. It was cool in the Crown Heights area and other solid blue Democratic areas of around the East Coast. There was a new young gig where people would go around and knock Jewish. I don't know what there's a term for those big hats that the conservative Jewish people wear. I don't know
the streamers,
but yes, those.
The streamers, yes, and
there's I don't know if you're aware. There's a new kick going around where people sneak up behind them and knock their hats off. So when you can attack strangers in the street, not just on college campuses, but in solid blue areas like Crown Heights, where Al Sharpton led the Get the Jew riots, by the way, this tells you that Jewish people are not safe walking on the streets of America. They're not safe in classrooms and in the most esteemed college universities like here in Pittsburgh, the University of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Columbia, Harvard. There's been nasty attacks going on constantly for years now that we don't hear about, that we should hear about. And I don't know if you knew about that business in Crown Heights, but it exists. It came out in the Times of Israel, and I was happy to bring that to the attention of anybody who'd be eager to take a look at it and be horrified by it.
Yeah, we in the community have the misfortune that having been here and been through this so many times with so much anti-Semitism and so many incidents, it's hard to keep track of it all. There have been so many times that these things have gone amiss. But yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of incidents of people building up to the idea that you can attack Jews in the streets and even murder them.
But historically, that used to be from the right historically,
mm-hmm.
And from 20 years hence, that's changed. All of a sudden, it's the right that is desperate to buoy up Jewish American culture and Israel, and the left who is desperate to run them into the sea. And how that happened is bizarre, but it has happened, and sooner or later, hopefully, Jewish Americans will open their eyes to it and realize that their friends are not in the left anymore. Their worst enemies are on the left.
Yes, and the left wing, the left wing, the rise of left wing anti-Semitism. It's gotten ridiculous.
But it's hard to explain how it even happened, because historically, you go back to the 1920s. The 1920s, Jewish people, if they couldn't get into the country club, it was, and I'm sure that did happen. I wasn't around back then, but and I know we all like to look back on previous generations and point the finger at them. But it's always the grudge against conservative Republicans was that back in the 20s and in those, Great Gatsby's day, the Jewish people were blackballed and held down and not accepted as equals from the propertied conservative right-wing class, and that certainly was the case. But it's not 1920 anymore. It's 2020, and that stuff has come. There's been nothing that has changed so abruptly and so shockingly as that. And I keep harping on that, but again, I all the Jewish people that I know, all the Jewish people that I interact with, and I'm sure that I'm not Jewish. Like I said, I'm from Texas, and I'm a regular American guy, half Lebanese, half English. I don't know really that much about Jewish culture, other than if I see that they're great people and they pay their taxes and they obey the law, and I see the country that they've created in the Middle East, and it seems like a great place with decent people, surrounded by other countries that are maybe not so nice. So I'm on the side of the Jews. I'm on the side of the Israelis, and I'm on the side of the Jewish Americans here in the United States. But I can see how there'd be some lingering doubt as to whether conservatives just are supporting Israel because they've got some strange religious concept that the end days are coming, and it'll help their Christian view of things if the Israelis do X, Y, and Z as opposed to A, B, and C. And that had been something to concern Jewish Americans, I think, in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. But the worm has turned, and you can't say it enough. And that's why, again, my kudos to the Jewish Chronicle here in Pittsburgh. It took a lot of guts for them to publish that. I'm sure they made a lot of their readers very mad, who still are hanging on to the Talib is for us, and Omar is a good representative, and Al Sharpton just wants the best for us. I don't know how they believe that, but I'm sure I run into a bunch that do. And like I said, I'm not Jewish. I assume you are, and you okay. And you then I don't need to school you on this. You must know plenty of friends and relatives and colleagues who are still apt to believe that sort of thing. So. Kudos to the Jewish Chronicle. It took a lot of guts, and hopefully the editors will get a listen to this interview.
Yes, and that is great for them to publish it. And I think that slowly but surely in the Jewish world we are starting to open our minds. We have our Ben Shapiro's and our Dennis Prager's, and myself and a few others. Although I mostly talk about international affairs, but we're getting more and more of us who are speaking up. But I do remember, 20 years ago, I was the only conservative yid in the shul, and you'd be there with 100 people, and they'd be like, oh yeah, there's Isaac, the Republican. It was a different time. But even then, I grew up in a liberal family, working class family. Like I said, my grandparents only started voting Republican for Reagan and Newt. I don't feel we've changed that much. It's just that like you've talked about, the values that we hold, family, hard work, honesty, sacrifice, honesty,
patriotism.
Absolutely. America is the greatest country that's ever existed. And, I'm proud that my family's been a part of it, that my grandfather fought in the Second World War and so on. We all, Americans, we all share this legacy, and it's, there are these people trying to bring it down. And I'm glad to see Americans standing up now, and we're going against that. So real quick, my first foray into your work some years ago is your work on seismic prediction. Mm-hmm. So I have to, because I'm a geek, I have to ask about, can you tell us something about the latest in seismic prediction? And I understand you're working on a book, a fictional work about seismic prediction as well.
That's correct. Well, to give your listeners a quick rundown, from 1996 to 2016, I was one of the most heard voices on the planet trying to get seismology to take a look at the tides, the lunar and solar tides, especially during certain near syzygy events, some times and dates during the year, where not that an earthquake is destined to happen, but where on the San Andreas particularly, there might be higher windows of higher probability for a sizable trembler to take place. And of course, this flirts too closely to earthquake prediction. And earthquake prediction, your listeners probably don't, well, on the West Coast, they certainly realize this, but all across the rest of the world, they don't realize what incredible animosity it can be, the incredible firestorm that can be set into motion just among seismologists and geologists, just by even flirting with the idea of earthquake prediction. But so for those 20 years, I wrote 4 books and been on the air and made predictions in public and on the Howard Stern show, and came close on so many occasions. Inside Edition, CBS News, all those places. Just a few years ago, finally, in 2016, if anybody's curious to hit the search engine and see if I'm telling the truth or not, a huge sea change has taken place in seismology. In 2016, in the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, the New York Times, 1,000 newspapers across the planet, it was determined that indeed tidal forces they don't cause earthquakes on the San Andreas or Cascadia, but they are liable to act as the straw on the camel's back to push into rupturing an earthquake that was getting ready to happen in any event. So for the 20 years that I told science, and I went back, and it turns out that this idea of conjoined lunar and solar tides working in tandem, putting the final impetus to put an earthquake into motion on the West Coast, this has been it goes back to the 1850s. I found articles throughout for the last 150 years that peer-reviewed, stating basically what I was saying, but that didn't fit the mold of the time, and were, like so many things, went straight into the dustpan of history. So it turns out it wasn't my idea. That there have been a number of great physicists and seismologists who have for the last couple of hundred years had been pointing at the tides and wondering indeed if they did play a part in seismicity. And so if there's any, there's a couple of claims to fame that I've got. One of them is that I'm the guy that said, you know what, we ought to really have an idea. We ought to at least take a look at these tidal times and these near syzygy events, these supermoons, to see how closely they are aligned with higher activity of higher incidence of seismic activity. And the other great, and it turned out I was right. I'll say that now. And anybody can find out for themselves if they Google that. The other great moment in my scientific career was I was one of the first people on Earth to call BS on dark matter. And it turns out that over the last few months especially, over the last couple of years, there's a complete sea change. Physicists have come to realize that it was a very stupid idea for them to pretend that there's something that exists that you can't see, can't touch, can't smell, can't feel, can't reflect light, can't absorb it. The only thing it does is make the equations for gravity that we can't figure out in the Andromeda galaxy, which is spinning around too quickly. It puts an end to that. It solves that. It was they simply invented a mechanism by which to make the equations work out. Even the inventor of dark matter, a Jewish lady, I forgot her name, a great astronomer, not Henrietta Leavitt, but I'm sorry, it's escaped me. Even the discoverer of dark matter, she didn't discover dark matter. She discovered that the Andromeda galaxy was rotating too quickly, and that something was wrong with our gravitational equations, because either Einstein and Newton's equations work or they don't. And if you look at and it's not just Andromeda, it's all the galaxies. If you look at galaxies, they spin too quickly, so they must have dark matter holding them together. Except that there's quite a number of other things that can be happening. Maybe our view of gravity needs to be tweaked again. Newton had it right; he's pretty close. Einstein has it even better. That doesn't mean that Newton was wrong, but there may be something beyond Einstein. Maybe there's, at very great distances, unbelievable distances, and concerning giant things like galaxies, maybe there's a few little things about gravity we still don't know. And to jump to the idea that dark matter is the end-all and be-all, and there it is, it's all over. Don't have to worry about that. That's what's making the galaxies spin properly. It's turned out to be nonsense, and I was one of the first people on Earth, I'm proud of that, to say
yes.
Nonsense on that publicly as well. So
I'm been glad to see that. That's one of those things, you just create a variable, just add in a y to the equation, and then it makes it work. It's a fascinating mental exercise from the point of view of, what would make this machine work. If I could imagine anything that would make it work, is that could help you would think, identify a problem and the scope of it, but just inventing, there's dark matter and we don't know anything about it, but it makes all the equations work. Yeah, that got it. So now, we're getting a lot of people out there. On the seismic thing, I lived through the Loma Prieta quake in the San Francisco Bay Area. I was very close to the epicenter myself, so I was in the zone where, you have the waves that go out, but there are the waves that go down to the mantle and come back up. And so, we weren't doing the side to side. We were doing the up and down. And that was really exciting. But, I like, you're talking about that because we're just starting to understand now, you're speaking of gravity, the impact that the moon, the sun, Jupiter, Mars, and other, parts of, other bodies in the solar system impact the Earth and its movement. And that all of them have an impact, and that like you were saying, you create stresses at different times. You're going to get earthquakes and volcanic activity where there is, where the pressure is highest, or when the opportunity. Now, that doesn't always mean, like you say on the San Andreas, that we're going to get a big quake. But like with tornadoes, we at least have an idea. There's a season, and we have a pretty good idea what kinds of storms. Having that little bit of warning, we're in a high likelihood of earthquake. It would have been helpful if just a few days before Loma Prieta, if we'd had somebody say, hey, we're at a, high risk for earthquake this week. Precisely. Maybe some people would have gone out and bought some more water or thought about it a little bit. But when there's no warning, it just hits, and then you have to deal with the fallout from it, So. Well,
your point about the moon, it is an absolutely tremendous force. The lunar tides are simply they pick up the Pacific Ocean twice a day. That alone just shows you the unbelievable muscle of the gravitational tides to pick up the oceans, high tide and low tide, twice a day and slosh them around the planet as if it were water in a baby's bassinet. These are tremendous cosmic forces. They impinge on our planet in all kinds of ways. And you're also right about even a 10-second warning now. And of course, the world's changed. On Loma Prieta, that was 89. Here we are in 25. The United States just a few years ago completed our EEW system. We joined the rest of the civilized world. Mexico, Turkey, Israel's got them, Taiwan, China. EEW systems now give screaming warnings to your cell phone, maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds, up to maybe, depending on where the epicenter of the earthquake is, it could be up to 50 seconds or a minute. A screaming notice to your personal cell phone, plus, that an earthquake not only it is coming, it's already ruptured and it's on its way. These alerts race ahead of the seismic waves to warn communities of the oncoming seismic waves, which travel fast. Seismic waves travel about the speed of a satellite, but nothing beats the speed of light. And the millisecond that something happens on the San Andreas, for example, these screening warnings go out to hospitals so that doctors just getting ready to perform delicate surgery can put away the scalpels and brace for the impact. Airplanes getting ready to land at LAX can pull off and not land on rupturing tarmac. Brakes automatically go into effect at BART. You know, and this is all instantaneous, and it's done for 50 million people on the West Coast and billions of people all around the world. So this earthquake prediction is impossible, Kennard. Has held the world back. We're at the place now where earthquake prediction is prosaic. It's mundane. It happens all the time, at least in the 10-second, 1 minute category. And you're right. There are seasons. There are categories. There are probably beyond that. You know, a couple of days before, a couple of weeks before. There are instances where one can at least conjure up a few ideas where it might be smart to at least prepare for the worst, and based on some higher probability windows that I believe exist, and I think the science lately has said that they do.
That is good, and you know, little bit by little bit, we've started, you know, engineering things differently and you know, planning for the future a little bit. You know, at least buildings are built more sturdily and this kind of thing. So little bit by little bit, we adapt to these things. Real quick, if you'd tell us about a couple of your books, and then we'll close out.
Well, I've written 4 books on seismology having to do with earthquake prediction, and the 2 books in science fiction were space opera. One is Pilots of Borealis. The recent one is, my favorite, Thin Walker. It's a great story that takes place in 10 centuries from now, which was very difficult to try to write to create the world 1,000 years in the future. And the science fiction coming up is the Tesla prophecy. Thank you for mentioning that. That takes place present day in Los Angeles, having to do with something which someday maybe we'll get to talk about. It's a fascinating subject, having to do with weather war, having to do with not just earthquakes taking place, but powers like the United States, Russia, China, who have been trying to work around figuring out a way to maybe man-made engender an earthquake. The United States Air Force has been, and several other, I'm sure we're not the only ones looking into it, but the idea of weather warfare is really it's something that used to be science fiction that might be science fact at this point. Whether you can nudge a hurricane in the direction of an enemy's port, or play off certain VLF waves to pound in a seismically active region and push an earthquake to happen under the territory of an adversary. To use weather as warfare, well, we've been doing it since we've been seeding clouds. And during the Vietnam War, the United States Air Force continuously made the Ho Chi Minh Trail a muddy mess by pounding it with rain, by cloud seeding the rains. Also in Cuba, during the same time, to make the Cuban enemy or adversaries in Cuba, the communists, suffer, they did the exact opposite. The United States Air Force wrung out the moisture in clouds that would have made landfall in Cuba and would have rained on Cuba and could have supported their sugarcane crop, but were kind of devastated by our cloud seeding operation. So it's a book about weather warfare having to do with engendering an earthquake under Los Angeles. It's fiction, but it might not be, and it may not be in 10 or 20 years, certainly.
Well, it is always amazing how, you know, science fiction later becomes science fact. I mean,
always.
You know, we have We have, Romans writing about trips to the moon, and we have Jules Verne writing about nuclear submarines. Electric submarines, but headed in that general direction years before they become the reality, and then eventually take over. Well, it's been great chatting with you, and maybe I'll have to have you back sometime to talk about this stuff going forward. Check out that article, listeners, for the Pittsburgh Jewish Chronicle, and this nonsense attack on John Fetterman, and these books. They may be worth a read. I'm going to be looking at some of them myself. I love sci-fi and I love science. So, thank you, David, for joining us, and I'll look forward to sharing all that stuff out on X and Facebook.
It's my pleasure. Again, thanks for the time and trouble. It's a great pleasure to talk to your listenership. My website's www.earthquakepredictors.com. Again, thank you for the time. I appreciate it.